9 months ago. 9 months ago, that is insane. Five Nights at Freddy's, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, once again to FNAF series and its overcomplicated mysteries that, let's face it, shouldn't have been this much complicated, but it is what it is. 9 months ago, we made this video, which over 21,000 of you guys watched it as we speak, and it had only one purpose: to make a timeline and story from all Five Nights at Freddy's games and books that I'm personally satisfied with, because there are tons of them out there, to be honest, and I want one that I'm personally satisfied with. We made part 1, and then for 9 months, nothing until now. So many of you guys asked for part 2, and one of you guys even suggested me to take a different approach. Rather than going for overcomplicated stuff, you want me to explain it in a way so that even a newcomer who's never got into this franchise can understand it easily. So this is how we're gonna do. We're gonna pick one topic that is important and try to explain it in a way that is understandable, and then push it to the timeline. So we're basically extracting events from timeline and then explaining those and putting those explained pieces back into the timeline frame. So here we are with FNAF Final Mega Theory Timeline Part 2. Let's get started. In Part 1, if you haven't watched it, I'll put it up in the cards. I came to the point where I started the timeline with that this whole story is about a family, or most specifically the Aftons, where I went into details as to the father, mother, son, and a daughter. Now I'm saying that this story is about the same family, but with the addition to the business partner of that family and that main character that we play as in all these games throughout the first till the end. Over the course of 4 years, we got around 7 games in total, with 6 being the main story games: FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4, alongside Sister Location and Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, and the 7th entry, which is a standalone game, The Ultimate Custom Night, which was quote-unquote the end of the William Michael saga. In all of these games, when you look at the story and see the pinpoints that are standing out, it mostly has to do with a guy named William and his partner Henry and someone named Michael, alongside murders and pizzerias. So let's go through all of these one by one. We know that this story is about a family, most specifically the Aftons: William Afton, Mrs. Afton, Elizabeth, and Michael, alongside his older brother. Again, more onto that later. It is a common theme throughout FNAF that each family member has a long history and connections with every murder that has happened in this universe and pizzerias. William Afton, the father, was a businessman. He started his own business of pizzeria restaurants with a partner known as Henry. Henry was mentioned late, very late in FNAF World, and then in FNAF 6, aka Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, although he's been present from the first game in the story. Well, okay, maybe not the first game, but you get the point. Both William and Henry were business partners, and they used to run and work in pizzeria restaurants that got famous and widely popular. Families, kids used to love this place to the heart because of the animatronics that performs on the stage for kids, pizzas, and most specifically for fun. They used to have parties, birthdays, special events, etc. You get the point. But before we go even further, we need to understand and learn a little bit more about these two characters, who are basically the stone of this pizzeria and this story. William Afton was a businessman. He was the business guy. He used to handle business side of things when it comes to running the pizzerias. More onto him in just a second. Henry, on the other hand, he was the tech guy. He was the one making sure all the robots, these animatronics, are working and performing so that they're ready to work on the stage for kids and families in the evening. What's more important is that there used to be specific timings when these restaurants were open to public and when they used to close. We also need to keep in mind that there has been numerous openings and shutdowns of pizzerias due to so many incidents, which we'll get to later. One more thing, that not every restaurant has a linear story. Each pizzerias and restaurant are connected to each other, and one story going in one pizzeria has affected another pizzeria and the policies in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. Now, Henry, the business partner of William, did created those animatronics that goes around in pizzeria, making sure sure that kids are satisfied and enjoying their time. However, we learned that those same animatronics that are designed for kids' fun and entertainment became the cause of so many deaths and destruction in the same pizzerias. And before we get to that detail, you might be wondering, if Henry was the one who created it, doesn't he's the one who's guilty? I mean, after all, he's the tech guy to make sure every tech, robot, animatronic is working properly. Well, you could say that in a sense, but he made those animatronics with no ill intentions. And those robots and animatronics were doing their job the right way for the most part until someone decided to do something else with them. You see, both these people, William and Henry, were working together in this business, so one would have control over the other. And this is where William parts comes in, as he started to have different intentions, thoughts regarding how to use these animatronics and what to do with them. Most specifically, and this is the most crucial and important point in this whole FNAF universe story, how to stand out in the competition of this business market and how to please investors. Hence, Five Nights at Freddy's sister location reference comes in. And I'm not just making these things up, I have proofs to back it up. We need to understand that yes, as much as books and games are not related to each other and does possess different timeline and universe, remember, Scott Cawthon did confirm that these two overlap, hence answering some questions over the other side here and there. So if there's a confusion regarding the games, books are the best way to understand it. And this is where the fourth book, aka the fourth closet, comes in. This book is insane. It has all sorts of stuff that you need to know in order to understand FNAF lore. But going back to the point, on page 147 and 148, it confirms and explains how Henry was the one who created those animatronics, but realized later that someone else was having different intentions. Quote, "My grief was already beginning to waken me to reality when I began what was to be her final stage. When I rose slightly from the depth of my despair, I saw that I had no choice but to seize my work, for I was only feeding my own delusion, my old faithful partner, who I can only hope now is in a grave of his own, took what I had begun and made something of his own, something dreadful. He crafted my beloved work into something of his own and endowed it with who knows what kinds of evil. I was able to stop him and to seal away what he made, and you, Jenny, must ensure that the seal remains." End quote. And for the part of Henry making animatronics on page 193, Jen, I'm gonna come to that in just a second, was talking to Henry. Quote, "Jen, I swear she's more than another animatronic doll. You should see, she walks and she talks." "Of course she walks and talks, Henry." Jen's voice was angry. "She walks because everything you build can walk, and she talks because everything you build can talk." And a couple of lines later, "My lost family," Henry repeated. Jen took pause, looking regretful. "It doesn't have to be that way, but you need to let go of this. Your wife, your son, they can still be a part of your life, but you have to let go of this." Now, don't get overwhelmed by all this. Jen isn't someone new. Besides, we don't need to know about her anyway, unless you want to know every tiny detail. Well, if that's the case, then okay. So, in short, Henry had a wife and a son that left him, obviously, after seeing what has happened and how Henry got obsessed with his own work and at his own creations with no ill intentions. However, he had a daughter too, who is connected to this story, and she was very important, and she is. Jen, on the other hand, was the one who looked after Henry when his wife and son left him. However, Jen didn't appear in games, you might be wondering. Well, this is where the point of books and games having different universes comes in. They explain the points, but in a different way. And we're gonna get to Henry's daughter in just a second. And just for you guys out there, the nerdy ones that don't believe book stuff, let me show you how in-game Henry appeared twice, and it was confirmed that he was the one who built these animatronics and technology. Let's start with FNAF World, everybody's favorite game. In the second update, Update 2.0, the ending that you would get is something like this.
The show will begin momentarily. Everyone, please stay in your seats.
This is obviously Henry, referring to him making something terrible, something that we've talked about a little bit earlier. This was confirmed through another FNAF book called Silver Eyes, which is also a very important book for Five Nights at Freddy's lore. Henry calls that thing Baby, an animatronic that was mainly and heavily advertised and featured in the 5th game, Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. Baby's character was featured a lot throughout this, but surprisingly her character appeared in books too, not as a puppet. That's something very different. But going back to Henry, in the 6th game, aka Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, after getting the Insanity ending, you would get some blueprints and how some of the technology in FNAF works and how all of this works in these restaurants. One of them was Scooper, and guess who was explaining and talking while that audio recording was played? That is right, Henry. And how do we know it's Henry? Well, on the corner of the screen it says explicitly HRY223, obviously referring to Henry. And in this audio recording he explains how he realized it later that he has created something that was took by someone else, William, and turned it into something else. So now we know Henry was the tech guy who made the animatronics in the first place, who made sure that their business gets state-of-the-art tech and that they can stay up to date with technology. However, his business partner, the one who was doing all the paperwork and pleasing investors, William, had other plans, and Henry realized it later, but it was too late to say the least. Going back to the main point, how do we know it's William Afton who's been doing all these paperworks and trading with other organizations, pleasing investors? Well, in the 5th game, sister location, the opening cutscene explicitly mentions his name.
There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state-of-the-art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
That is right, that was one of the biggest reveal of FNAF franchise history. But don't get too excited about this part. Pay attention to the verse and details here. William is explaining all the features that their robots or animatronics possess, such as dancing, singing, heck, even making an ice cream. However, the other party that they're dealing with, or investors, they were not interested in those features. Why? Because they wanted to see the real deal of what makes these animatronics and pizzerias so unique and different. What makes them stand out in this business? And this is where Henry's line of "he took my beloved work and turned it into something dreadful" comes in. The point of these animatronics in the initial stages were to dance, sing, present ice creams, and that's about it. However, these were also the same features that other restaurants at that time in the business market possesses as well. So William had to stand out in this competition. He had to make sure that their characters, that their robots and their animatronics possess something different so that they could stand out and please investors. And that's how he got overwhelmed with other possibilities of turning these robots and using them for something else, thus starting chaos and evilness. And this is where the official timeline comes into play. In part 1, I stated that it all started late 70s, a time where Henry and William became business partners, and this is where their business of pizzeria started, Fredbear's Family Diner. We need to understand that this timeline is kind of messy because some of these pizzerias and diners are skeptical when it comes to timeline. So don't take each pizzeria and diner explicit to what game describes them as to what. So Fredbear's Diner and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Let's start with these two. In part 1, I've explained how the bite of 83 happened, the first ever bite. Death of the first AFTON family member. But in the end, I also said that that was not the first location, and that wasn't the first AFTON's family member's death. You see, it's true, Bite of 83 was the first bite, and there were 2 bites in total, the one of Crying Child and the other one was the Bite of 87. But what started all this is what we're trying to learn here. Where all this began. Who started this? For that, we need to go all the way back to the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, where the infamous incident happened where 5 children went missing. We touched that element specifically, and we called this incident the first incident that started all of this. Fredbear Diner and Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria are 2 of the earliest pizzeria locations to appear in the FNAF universe, and these 2 hold really special place in the story. The Bite of 83 happened in Fredbear Diner, and 5 missing children incident happened in the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria in very early stages. But even before that, William had different plans. In 80s or 1980s, William was at his peak, from going around killing kids to tuning robots and making them deadly. Henry worked with him for a while until he realized that his partner has some other plans that he didn't sign up for. Hence, Henry committed suicide. Well, you could say that. But going back to William, he had a daughter named Elizabeth Afton, and Henry also had a daughter. When I was thinking about this theory and timeline, I got super confused as to which death happened first. We know both of these kids died, both Elizabeth Afton and Henry's daughter. Is it the bite victim that died first, or was it Henry's daughter? I could go into both and let you be the judge. Here's my take on why bite victim was the first death that happened and why it triggered William to the other extent. Bite victim was presumably died later after he got bit, because it makes no sense for a human body to survive without a frontal lobe. Now, bite victim got bit by who? An animatronic, right? But most importantly, who built those animatronics? Who designed them? Who programmed them? That's right, Henry. And remember, he had no ill intentions, and these were very early events in the FNAF universe. Again, Henry created these robots with no ill intentions, but due to springlock failure, it didn't perform how it should have, and closed or failed as soon as its mouth was shoved by a child's head. That incident, the Bite of 83, was an accident. However, for William, in his head, it wasn't. In his head, it was intentional. It's quite clear that William's character had different sides. A lot of them, actually. For the most part, he doesn't care, don't give 2 hoots regarding anything. All he loves is his creation and pizzerias and what they offer. Things that fascinates him are how these robots tend to be more than that. More than robots. How we can give life to these robots. Souls. These machines. Making them more than just that. Hence, learning that one of the main reasons his son died was because of something that my business partner had created. He did something horrible. I mentioned families in the beginning. The reason for that, it's obvious that Henry and William's kids and families would also end up at pizzerias. After all, for their daughters, these pizzerias belongs to their fathers, so it is a big thing. Anyways, just like Elizabeth and other kids being in these pizzerias, it's fair to say that Henry's daughter was also there, and in emotions and in not thinking straight mindset, he drove his car to another pizzeria location at night, a place where Henry's daughter was going around playing. He killed her. First victim of William in cold blood. And this is not an assumption. Both in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and Five Nights at Freddy's 6, it's confirmed that someone drove a purple car around, purple resembling to William, and killed a little girl who was giving gifts to other kids out there. And that girl was Henry's daughter, the first kid, the first murder that went beyond death, that went beyond that, and became an unrested soul that had a purpose even after death and started to possess other animatronics and other lifeless souls. Hence Henry's daughter, aka Charlie, which was confirmed at the end of the fourth closet. In the ending, or should I say mind-boggling ending of the book, spoilers, the main character ended up at Cemetery, where he finds 2 gravestones. Quote, beneath the telephone pole, the grass rolled with waves, brushing against the 2 stones that sat together in the setting sun. The first was Henry's, and the other read, beloved daughter, Charlotte Emily. And most importantly, 1980 to 1982. 3. The same year, the bite victim got bit and died. And in the same year, Henry's daughter died, which makes sense in all of this because the timeline was confusing at first, but if you put these pieces together, it makes sense for all of this to happen in the same year. 1983, bite victim got bit in Fredbear's Diner. And also Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, 5 missing children incident happened. But before that, after bite victim's death, in the same events, because remember, there were a lot of other restaurants and pizzerias that were happening at the same time. Freddy Fazbear was a franchise, a big franchise, a big business that had so many restaurants, and they were killing it in the market. They were killing it in the business. And this is why I came to the point that Charlotte, or Charlie, died at the very early age by the hands of William after his son died because of something that he believes that was not true, implying that she was just 3 years old when she died. And this all makes it even more ridiculous. So that was this route. The other way around would be Henry's daughter dying first and then the bite victim getting bit, right? No, this is where Five Nights at Freddy's sister location comes in, or most specifically, one of the main characters of that game, Baby, comes in. We talked about her, how Henry was the one who created it, how he realized later that it's more than that. This is where it's safe to say that two pizzerias, let's say Fredbear Diner and Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria, were both open and running at the same time. Remember, this whole thing was a business competition. It was a business market. So many restaurants were open and running. Freddy's had to be different and stand out to make theirs worth paying and investing in. And this is where William's part comes in. William learned that he could experiment and take these robots, animatronics, to next level. And in doing so, he realized something that changed everything. Entire Five Nights at Freddy's universe. Something that came right after Charlie's death, right after Henry's daughter's death, and that started a new era of William Afton. What was that, you might ask? Well, you have to wait for part 3. I know, look, I don't have time. It's already crazy video out here. I need to edit this. But until then, since you're here, why don't you watch these FNAF videos? I know you guys love some of the FNAF on this channel. I'll make more of this if I get good reception on this video. And I'm gonna make part 3 regardless. I'm gonna make longer videos, longer FNAF videos theory, so that I can cover as much as possible. I wanted to cover Henry's daughter and her connection with William and Elizabeth and Baby, but that's gonna be for part 3. So I'll see you on the flip side in another video. Until then, take care and peace. Make sure to subscribe as well.